Welcome to the Air Force Installation Contracting Center Contracting Officer Study Group Roundtable Discussion. My name is Mary DeCoste. I am a procurement analyst at AFICC Joint Base San Antonio. I'd like to introduce Ms. Tracy Eubanks and Ms. Brooke Carpino. They're both assigned to the 772 Enterprise Sourcing Squadron, also here at Joint Base San Antonio, Lackland. Both Tracy and Brooke recently completed the 10-week COSG and successfully met the warrant board. So we thought it would be helpful for them to share some study tips and lessons learned with the current COSG students. Tracy and Brooke, welcome and congratulations on your unlimited warrants.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're happy to have you here today. So we figured let's start with self-preparation tips. What did you do and what do you recommend in this area?
For getting yourself ready to meet the mock boards and the boards, I think it's important as you're going through this process is to stay engaged with the contracting officer study group. So when you have those sessions, make sure that you attend those sessions so you get the information out of that and you're prepared for the part of the studying. Because you're going to have to do studying on your own to get yourself prepared for the boards.
Right.
And you're going to start going through boards pretty quickly. So I think one of the biggest things is get in there, get engaged with the actual sessions, make sure you're making it there and you're focused on that material, study so that you do well on those boards.
Yeah, I would also add, definitely ask questions. I mean, it is an open forum. So the best way to learn, of course, is off of the other COs and the instructor that's in there. Learn off of their experience and maybe, if you have questions so you can actually start looking into things a little bit deeper that you haven't touched before, that you don't quite understand yet. So, because when you do study on your own, you need to be able to actually understand what you're studying.
Right. Yeah, so we were pretty fortunate in the fact that our focal point also gave us time and resources in terms of room and SMEs or subject matter experts. The subject matter experts for us were the unlimited warrant folks in our organization. So they volunteered their time through that focal point to come in once a week with us. So we had a different SME or unlimited warrant person with us that brought their experiences into that session aside from the class.
Right. In addition to the COSG that you went to on a weekly basis.
Yes, in addition to the CSOG. And they would bring questions and they would help us interpret those questions and look at them, read them, and break them apart and be able to pull out what that question was really asking, and so that we could formulate the answers to those scenarios. Mm-hmm. And the big part of it, like Brooke said, is we were working together. We didn't do it on our own.
Right.
So we had each other to help ourselves out in that studying process.
Have your wingman with you.
Yeah. And also, we had a couple hours a day that we were working together aside from the study groups. We both found that there's a lot of extra time that you put in for studying on your own. Good thing we had each other because we're getting tips from each other, we're writing them down, and then we could go back to our own spots, whether that be at home or wherever it was, and start really understanding the materials.
Interesting, okay. What were some of the processes used within your unit to help you get ready to successfully meet the warrant board?
Okay, for our particular unit, we actually recently started an actual study group, which Tracy was just talking about. So we would actually meet at least 3 days out of the week to practice our intros, to go over the questions that the SMEs gave us. If we had any questions, I know a couple times I'd be like, hey, I was looking this up. I didn't know this was in here. Hey, did you understand this? And we would discuss so that we get a better understanding, as a group, which that helped tremendously with that.
So once we went through those groups and we had that time together, I would go back home and I'd have my books open, I have my computer open, and a pencil and a piece of paper, and I'm writing things down. And that's what I ended up studying initially, was all that information. Kind of put it in its far parts, and I would run through
flashcards, or what did you use?
I tried to start using flashcards, and that's a great point. I mean, you're going to hear a lot of folks will recommend the flashcards. You've got to, when you're going through this, you've got to find what works for you. And the flashcards didn't work for me, so it was easier for me to write down on a piece of paper, put it in my notebook. So I have a white notebook with all of my study notes in it that I used, and it started out with all of my research. And then the scenarios that were being brought into our SME study groups or our unlimited warrant study groups, I was compiling those. So we're fortunate enough to where we have a pretty good bank of questions that we compiled over the time period.
That your unit put together?
Yes, that we use to do that type of study. And then we eventually went over to using those questions, and then we would study those. That's what helped me also. Once I got that foundation down of the materials that you cover in the COSG, then you can take that and you start looking, well, we started looking at our bank of study questions that we were getting. And it helped us to be able to start now formulating those answers to those questions or to the scenarios that were being brought to us. And I tell you what, we've got the greatest group of unlimited warrants in our organization because they really put a lot of time into us. And to help us, they gave us that information. Right. So if you don't have that study group, go find your unlimited warrants. They're more than willing to help you out. Mm-hmm. And in our case, they were with us, and they provided us a lot of study material, relevant study material that really helped us get through the process.
Yeah, and like Tracy, I have a notebook, but for me, it worked having those flashcards for just the stuff like thresholds, what's on a J&A. I mean, there's 17 items that need to be listed in J&A, what's included in a DNF, like stuff like that. The flashcards for me helped for that particular stuff.
So you got to see what works for you.
Yes, and that's important. When folks come up and ask me, now what I did, where's your materials? I could give you my study book, but it may not do anything for you. For the pure fact, that's what helped me study. That's what got me through it. Find your way. Find what is going to work for you and put that together. So no, not everybody studies the same way.
Yeah. Sounds like getting together with other people, though, helps a
lot. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Well, are there any lessons learned you'd like to share, or something you wish you would have known when you were preparing to meet the board?
How to manage stress. Know that there's a lot of material. Mm-hmm. And to get your arms around it, if you're not feeling that, then that's normal. Don't worry about it. You're going to go through all of that stress. You just got to put some time into it. You really have to put time into it. Be committed to it. Know that that's what you're going to be doing for a period of time, and really be kind of dedicated to the process and let the process work. If you're in that first, your first board is required, your first mock board is required at the 5th week. Mm-hmm. Your focal point may have a program together where maybe you do a pre-mock board before that first week, or before that 5th week, or that required one. And that material that you're going to cover is the material that you covered up to that point. So don't get yourself too far ahead, I guess. Sure. Just concentrate on what you have on your plate at that time. So one of the biggest things you're going to do initially in that first week is you're going to work on your introductory of yourself. So introduce yourself. Start working on that, and by the time you get to your formal mock board, that's just going to happen, because it shouldn't be something that you're worried about at that point. You already know what you're going to say and what you're going to do, and you get that out, and it settles you down, and you start on the questions. So just, stay in that process and let that process happen as you're going through those mock boards. Make sure that your focal points doing what they're supposed to be doing. As your group goes through it, the focal points are responsible for ensuring that they're setting up those mock boards for you. Very important to get those mock boards in. We were lucky enough with our group that our focal point did a mock board every 2 weeks. So we knew that we had to keep ourselves prepared, and we knew that was coming. And I think the idea behind it for us was just to get that practice, get as much practice as we could get, and kind of shorten down those.
And they kind of try to simulate what an actual one would be, like time you and give you the same number of questions and that type of thing.
Yes, so, and we're getting feedback from board members also, which is very important. One thing that first couple boards that we went through were all kind of like down in the mouth, right? we were kind of like, oh boy, I know nothing. Because of the feedback, you've got to keep an open mind, and you have to be thick-skinned, because if you don't take that and really use it to your advantage, then
don't take it personal.
You do not take it personal. So there was there's a few things that I will never forget now, just because of the feedback, because I didn't remember it in a board. So when the board member would tell me, I'll never forget that again.
Yeah, or certain questions that would pop up. I was like, I have never seen that before. And I will never forget it now.
I will never forget that. But make sure that you're getting those mock boards as you're going through the process, because that's only
sounds very important that way.
Yeah, I would say stay persistent. If you don't have, I guess, a group like we had, stay persistent with your focal point to keep those mock boards coming, because the longer they're spaced out, the harder it tends to get, because you need to kind of keep it fresh in your mind, because if it spaces out within months, between the two, then you kind of start to lose some of the practice that you've been doing.
We had one of our advantages was having broken our group, because when we would get to the mock boards, we okay, who wants to go first? Let's make out the schedule. And nobody ever wants to just jump in there, right? So I'll go first. Brooke's like, just put me down, I'll go first. And then it helped us all go, okay, I'll go second, I'll go third.
Now, were the other people, when someone was going in, were the other people that were part of the group, were they listening to how other people would answer the question too, or were they not in there at the same time?
Our actual mock boards were set up as close as possible as they could be to the formal board. So you would come down here 20 minutes, or you would go to the location 20 minutes prior. The proctor was one of our unlimited warrants, or one of our SMEs would proctor us. And they would sit you down in the room, give you the questions, and you had your 20-minute time period with your question. You would walk into the board just like the board. You'd have a proctor. You would go out after you were done answering all the questions, and then come back in, and you would get your out brief from the members of the board. So our mock boards were held that way. We designed it to where, as we were going along, if you did the board and you wanted to sit in on one of the mock boards later, after yours, you could come in and see what that was like. So you had that opportunity to do that. And some folks did take advantage of that. We had a few folks come in, would do those types of things. But I
think we mainly practiced our responses when we met as a group. Like the SME would give us a question, then we would kind of go around like, okay, I'm going to answer this one. Okay, you answer number 2. You answer number 3. So we could practice actually formulating a response and get some feedback as well. And it helped me to listen to other people's responses to kind of help come up with my own way of responding. Because again, just like studying your responses, it's going to be tailored to how you speak.
So if you're just relying on that time that you're spending together for your study, that's the time that you're actually kind of practicing the answering of the questions. Because as you know, as you're sitting in those mock boards, you get the scenario and
Yeah.
then you have to respond. And the idea behind all of our studying together like that was to get the scenario, look at the scenario, and then somebody take a turn on answering the question, and we would all listen. And then once they were done, we would kind of pick it apart a little bit, right? And we're all writing our notes, going, "Oh, I didn't think of that," and that would help us to
Yeah.
go back now on our own
Yeah.
and do that studying
Jog your
again.
memory and stuff.
Yeah, so I think we're very fortunate in having that set up for us. And I think there's a lot of focal points. From talking to other focal points, I know that they're out there doing that too. So
It's all very good points and everything. Was there anything else that you could think of, or that you'd like to share?
I don't know. What kind of questions do you give? I know I always get folks coming up to me asking me, okay, what did they really want? And what are the board members really looking for? When you're answering that question, are they looking for you
Everyone
to
wants
know?
to know that.
Are they looking for you to know FAR Part 16.601 parentheses A? And no, that's not the case. You do need to know that FAR part. So if it's FAR Part 16, just say, hey, I'm referencing FAR Part I'm referencing FAR Part 16 right now to answer this question. So yes, that's very early on in the answer of your question, so everybody knows where you are. And then that logical answer, and then the next question that I always get is, do you have to say it word for word out of the FAR? It's like, no, you don't have to say it word for word out of the FAR. You just have to have a logical sequence. I don't know some of the questions maybe you're being asked.
Like, they just want to know your thought process. They want to understand your thought process, how you got from point A to point B to your final answer. Actually, most of my questions have been, what do you study? And it's unfortunately everything.
Yeah, it's like,
it's hard to eliminate anything.
That's another one of those questions. Tell me what the 10 questions are they're going to ask me. I'm like, oh, I wish I'd have known that. If I could tell you, I would have known myself. Because your mind gets wrapped around, they're only going to ask me 10 questions, but I'm studying 30,000 different parts or 30,000 different things. How do I narrow this down? And that's a challenge. That was always a challenge for my mind, especially as I was studying and really approaching that formal board. I'm like, oh, what is it going to be? Am I studying it? Am I hitting the right stuff at the right time? That is one of the big questions that I get too, is how do you know? You don't.
You don't.
You don't.
So the things leading up to the day, everything that I was reviewing, none of it was part of my 10 questions.
Which is lucky you know the concepts, right?
Yeah.
And that's the big deal behind it, is you're probably never going to see those same questions over and over again in the same word, the exact same wording. But if you're able to pull out those concepts. Then you can talk your way through that. And one other thing that was impressed upon us as we were going through the group, as we were going through that process, is you really need to know what to say if you really don't know the answer to the question. Because the one thing that you don't want to say is, I don't know.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to have some type of response that makes sense. And I know that's happened to me a couple times going through the boards. And one of them was, okay, so if the question is asking this here, I'd say, well, I've never dealt with this before, but if I look at this question's kind of in this area. So if I'm thinking in this area, then this is the type of answer I'll give. And when I came back in, and this was one of the mock boards, I came back in, they're like, yep, you understood, you pulled out the concept, so the answer that you gave wasn't right on, but you knew that it was dealing with something along that lines. So don't just give up. I guess the answer is, don't just give up on yourself and say, I don't know. First of all, that's not going over big.
Right.
And second, you do know. You really do. You just kind of have to settle down and say, okay, if the question's asking this, then I'm going to go over here in this far part and I'm going to talk through it.
Yeah.
If you can talk through it, that's that logical process that the board members are looking for.
Yeah, that, and yes, remember that you actually have a full 60 minutes. So if you need to take time to think about it for a few minutes or for a moment, let them know, okay, you know, I'm thinking through this process or something like that, and take your time instead of just blurting out an answer.
And I think one of the important things that's being looked for as you're going through these boards is, are you going to rely on your resources as you're making these decisions as a contracting officer? If it deals with small business, are you just going to say, no, I'm going to go ahead and do this? Or are you going to go to small business so they can help you with those percentages of the small business concerns that you're working with? So you can kind of walk through those processes with them. So are you saying, well, okay, so if we're dealing with this in small business, I'm going through my small business person and I'm going to talk to them a little bit and tell them what I'm thinking and seeing, you know, if I'm on the right track. So this is what I'm going to do and this is why I'm going to do it. And this is what I'm going to talk to them about.
Right.
'Cause
But
I've done that
do some research before you go talk to them. Don't just
Yes.
go there and expect them to give you the answer.
Yes, yes.
That's
you're-
important too.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, just don't go and say, this is my problem, here you
Yeah,
go.
solve it for me.
me.
Show them that you've
No.
done some research and this is where you're heading and am I on the right track?
Yeah. So if you're doing that and you're, you know, if you've got a Procurement Integrity Act violation, are you going to the lawyers and saying, hey, this is what I'm doing, this is part of what I'm going to, this is the path I'm going down, am I missing anything? So are you articulating that as you're going through your answer in your process? So they're looking for that, the big things. And are you confident? You're not just sitting there going, oh, I don't know. I mean, you're confident in your process and the way that you're presenting yourself. Because I think one of the things that I heard a number of times was, how are you talking to folks that are coming up to you and they're not giving you any time? So you get a program manager, a project manager, or you get the colonel or whoever it is, or General Holt calls you on the phone, you're like, what? And they're asking you a question. You don't get time to prepare. You've got to be able to answer that question, right? Or say, I need time to research that, or whatever it is. But you've got to still keep your composure and have confidence through that process. So those are some of the things that, as we were going through, we were picking up from the folks that were helping us and those board members.
All right. Was there any other tips or lessons learned that you
I would
can
say
think
tips.
of? Yeah.
Always have a pen that you cannot click
That's a good one.
when you go for your mock boards and your board,
Okay.
so you're not tempted. I know that was a big thing for me, to practice not clicking a pen and not swiveling
And
in
not
my
swiveling
chair.
like I'm doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was one of the great things of having us in a group also, is when we were helping each other out, somebody was saying, hey, stop with the pen now.
Yeah.
So you are at an advantage if you're the group that you're going through this process with, you are actually working together. That is a huge advantage.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you coming down and sharing your tips and lessons and everything, and taking time out of your busy day, because I know everybody's really busy. And I wanted to share with the group that if you do have any questions during the COSG, please submit your questions via the AFICC Warrant Program workflow box, which they will be reflected in the COSG Week 1 slides, in the questions slide. And I want to thank you all for watching, and stay tuned to the next COSG, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.